I think since 1983 until today, I have never gave up hope. I've never gave up expecting the great country of America to have a checks and bounds system of oversight and accountability even within government. Government instills discipline, punishment, and all that on us citizens, but they are mandated to have oversight and be accountable for their own mistakes and their own crimes against the citizens.
Real quick, I would like to give a shout out to a company that is near and dear to my heart. It is Switching Camo. Our nation's veterans are at the forefront of my mind all the time, especially since I was a veteran. But nothing that we do in this country would be possible if it wasn't for our veterans. So with this company, what they do is they go out and they take a veteran with them on a hunt or on a fishing trip or a rafting trip or whatever, and basically get their mind off of whatever stresses might be going on in their mind. And it's all like-minded individuals that if they want to talk, they can talk. If not, and they just want camaraderie, they can have camaraderie. It's a good group of people, and I absolutely applaud this program. I've personally taken some veterans out on some hunts, and there's a lot of good that comes from it. So see what you can do about supporting Switching Camo in whichever way. Give them a like, give them a follow, and buy a hat from them or try and support a veteran in some way through them. It's amazing the things that they do and the giveaways that they give for veterans and for notoriety and stuff for the veterans. So definitely give these guys a like and a follow. You can find them at switchingcamo.com or Switching Camo on both Instagram, Facebook. All right, welcome back to the Primitive Republic. This is part 3. I honestly didn't expect it to be a part 3. I thought maybe we could get it done in 2, but there is so much that is involved in this whole cluster. I don't even really know what to say. I keep forgetting stuff, and it's a good thing I've got documentation and everything that I've got to go over and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we're going to get back into it and go over just the entire amount of scrutiny that Billy's had to go over, and his entire family has had to deal with, not to mention friends and stuff like that, and all for what, And so we're gonna go through this. This should be the last of this series of podcasts. And, you'll have to stay tuned for what's going to be coming next. It'll probably be a little bit before anything comes next, but it's going to be awesome, whatever comes next. So, anyway, let's get back into it. We had talked about before, Billy had, one thing that I wanted to hit on was Billy, we had mentioned that Billy had lost his outfitting license. And so one thing I had asked him is, why did you lose your outfitter's license? Which, of course, I knew the story behind it, but obviously you guys didn't. So I kind of want to get into how the license was lost, and it's going to show a little bit more of the harassment that comes to follow and the unconstitutionality that really transpired with this whole thing. So, Billy, how did you lose your license?
Well, they utilized a 3 strikes and you're out program, and they used unacceptable performance evaluations, and then they manipulated incidents, activities, and everything to make it look like I had violated either the law or their government policies, forest policies concerning outfitters, when in fact my documentation will prove that none of the 3 strikes that they used hold any legal weight whatsoever. Every one of the 3 can be discounted and proved to be erroneous charges.
And all documented.
Yes.
Like, we've actually got documentation to prove this, which is, if anybody has any question, I would say just about all of this is a matter of public record.
Yes.
Without, some letters and, stuff like that. But for the most part, just about all of this is public record. So I want to throw that out there for anybody that might be saying, oh, no, this is just a curmudgeon and, he's just sour grapes.
No, any correspondence that I had with the Cabinet Ranger District Ranger, the authorizing agent for the permits, any of that, it should be a matter of Forest Service district records.
Not to mention governmental.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of coincidental, the life I've lived for the last 27 years, that all of this documentation is totally intact in my possession. And I've now got it into computers and files, so it can be copied or viewed or whatever they...
And in several different locations.
Four locations, so that nobody can trash one and be done with it.
Yeah.
I will always have access to all of my records because of forethought.
Well, and not to mention what you had gone through when they came to ransack your house before.
Yeah, and hurt my wife taking my records.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
So the unacceptable performance evaluations, and they warn you, they threaten you. In just about every permit you ever get, they threaten you that if you don't do this, you could lose your license. If you do this, you could lose your license, and maybe if things change between now and then, you could lose your license anyway. I mean, it's that ambiguous, gray, and threatening that you just want to go in a dark room and get away from it all. But it's almost...
Is it like that normally being a guide, or...
I outfitted for 22 years. I mean, that's a career to most people. And I outfitted for 22 years before the Forest Service ever got regulatory power over my industry. I had 22 years in at that time, and it was absolutely blissful. The success of your occupation was determined by your talent and your energy and your legality. You're not going to get repeat customers if you're breaking the law. They see that you're not abiding by the rules, and they won't come back.
Well, not to mention, if you're breaking the law, it's only a matter of time before you get caught.
Right. But if they see you busting your back in every way you can, I mean, packing game out at night on a warm night, the meat might sour, so you stay up all night.
So, real quick, did my grandpa also fight for you on these as well?
Many occasions. Henry Barron was by my side and had my back as a...
Hang on real quick. This is a pretty loud vehicle coming down here. Sorry about that, folks. I guess it's about the time that everybody's getting in and stuff like that. They're going down the road. But anyway, go ahead.
But anyway, Henry Barron lived closer to central Montana, but I don't know how many times he would go above and beyond and drive over to the Kootenai National Forest, which was known as the trouble spot of Montana, as far as dealing with the Forest Service.
Because of
your
situation, or just in general?
In general, but mine was kind of publicized more because of the bear case. Because of the retaliation that we got in the picture after we stood our ground and defended ourselves successfully against their attacks over the grizzly bear, then they mounted a retaliation. And some of the stuff they were doing was illegal. It was not following even their own policies. And so Henry, as an official of the Outfitter Association, was very cognizant of the contract signed between the chief of the Forest Service and North American Outfitter Association, which covers Montana too, we had reached agreement on conditions, terms, dates, everything was agreed on, what we could do, what we couldn't do. If you ever read the contract, you would know it was a guideline. It was an operating guideline. But Henry, as an official of the organization of outfitters, had a responsibility, but he went above and beyond on that. He kind of took every outfitter's problem personal and came in as a statesman and tried to resolve this diplomatically.
Right, and I know that, I would hope that most of my listeners can pretty much see that I try and live above board and stuff like that, but all of that, and I'm definitely not perfect, but all of that has stemmed from my grandpa in the outdoors, and I've learned a lot of that from him. So you have really no reason to trust me other than just listening to me and following me on different media avenues and stuff like that. But this man, he will bend over backwards for his friends and for what's right. And if he does not feel that it's right, he will fight tooth and nail for it. And am I wrong on that? I mean,
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So, which he's actually going to be on the next series of podcasts. I know I've been actually promising that for a while now, and he's actually on his way up to Montana right now, and so we'll be running these podcasts, Billy's series, for the next few weeks, and then after that we might have a podcast here and there with some other people, but I'm going to be recording conversations for more than just one reason. Obviously, he's not getting any younger. I want to get his experiences and stuff, but I want to get his take on some of the cases that he's fought, and I'm sure this is going to be one of the big ones. I know several other, guides and stuff like that have been in trouble. I'm not going to mention any names at this point, but, I want to see what he's done and how he's fought for the outfitters and guides, and, I want everybody to see what sort of influential person he was and what kind of guy he was too.
And I would like to preface his term as representing all of us. In them days, in the 80s, we had such an anti-gun, anti-hunter movement going on out here in the West.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yes. And what was going on is this philosophy, this attitude, was infiltrating the Forest Service, the Fish and Game. All of our agencies, management agencies, were being taken over by this anti-movement that if they had had their way, they would have totally eliminated outfitting.
And sidebar, but what do you think the reason for that was?
Well, that's a good question, because I think there was probably several reasons. I stated a couple: anti-hunting attitudes, anti-gun attitudes. That was a real prevalent reason. But some people just like to have power and get a win. And I sensed that a lot, that they didn't talk a lot about the guns. They didn't talk a lot about anything about except this outfitting should be just shut down because I've seen this and I've seen that. But Henry Barron, when he took over as president, he had his hands full at that time because of a movement out here in the West that had infiltrated all the management agencies, which was 100% detrimental to anybody trying to make a livelihood in the outfitting industry.
Well, shit, I don't think it was just in the West, because he had told me about how he had gone down to Big Bend, was it Big Bend National Forest in Texas, as part of the North American Guides Association. I think he was the vice president of the North American Guides, and dealing with them down there as well. So, yeah, I'm not saying that there wasn't a movement, because there obviously was something going on if he was being spread out that thin. But.
Yeah, and I think just like the wolf movement that came in to get the wolves accepted in here. I don't think they totally got them acceptable. They just shoved them down everybody's throat. And that's what they were trying to do, to eliminate outfitters. And in my case, I firmly believe that the grizzly bear deal was used to try to get rid of one of the oldest outfitters, which was me. My mother was the only outfitter that had been in business longer here than me. And so if you can get rid of the old school, it's like what's going on right now back east where they destroy the monuments. If they destroy the history, they can turn the industry into whatever they want it to be.
Yeah, that's like going over to Germany and destroying Auschwitz. Not that I am for any of that. So I want to preface that, but I believe that monuments like that, and I hate using that as a word, but I just can't think of anything else at the moment. But I believe things like that need to be a reminder to people so that we do not repeat history.
Don't make the same mistakes.
Exactly. You might not like it, but the moment that you tear it down is the moment that is forgotten in history.
I'd like to interject something right at this point. We're talking about erasing our history and paying for mistakes. What the situation came down to with the Forest Service is there was no tolerance, there was no pardon, there was no forgiveness, there was nothing. If you were documented of stubbing your toe, you paid the penalty to the Forest Service.
Hang on real quick. We got another vehicle. Looks like a dune buggy or something like that, a homemade dune buggy or something, getting ready to come by. Sorry, folks. This is this is kind of a selfish thing. I kind of like being in the outdoors on this, and not to mention my kids are inside and watching Dora the Explorer and playing hide and seek and all kinds of stuff like that. It's believe me, this is less of a distraction than what's going on inside. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I guess the point I want to make is I'm a firm believer of handling my own problems. And I was doing quite well as a representative for the other outfitters in my area, which I was mandated to represent them. I was the chairman of the Forest Service Committee. I pulled a term as vice chairman of the Fish and Game Committee for the outfitters of the state of Montana.
And they cannibalized one of their own.
Well, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do, because the minute that the Forest Service targeted me, they let the rest of the outfitters know that if any of them supported me, they would be next. They would eliminate their livelihood.
Wow.
I had outfitters come and tell me that they agreed with my representation of the other outfitters, but they couldn't stand up because that would be
political suicide.
Yes, it would, and business suicide.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's more what I meant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they chose the lesser of two evils and just sit quietly and watched what they did to me.
Yeah. So sorry, I really got us off on a tangent, but back to the license thing. But I wanted to put out there just what sort of guy was representing you, what sort of guy was in your corner, so that, and his record speaks for himself. You can absolutely look him up. I mean, he had a lot to not to get off on him. I'm not trying to blow smoke up his ass right now, but anyway.
Well, let me make one last quote about that. The thing that impressed me, I was no child when I assumed that position of representation. I was very clear. I had a total clarity of what my obligations and responsibilities was going to be, and from the day one that I sat down at that table to represent these outfitters, there was never a doubt for a second that Henry Barron had my back. And that you can't buy with money, folks.
Yep. So, anyway, back to the 3 strikes.
Okay. So, you got to understand that sometimes these people that are authorizing a permit on national forest, they have blinders on. It's like they don't think there's anything else happening in the world on that day except what's between their blinders. So I stopped one day from leaving the ranch, and I had a fellow with me, a friend of mine who had a legal Montana bear tag, and we'd been out to my mother's ranch, and we were trying to do bear damage hunts with legal bear hunters that were citizens of Sanders County and Montana. It was unguided. They were going to come and do the Hill family a favor by eliminating some of these bears that were killing her beef calves. So one of these fellas was with me, and he came in the ranger station with me, and I kind of got into conversation with George Bain, the authorizing agent for the outfitter permits. And it was in bear season that all this happened, and during the conversation, he gets kind of hostile with me and looks at me, and he said, "I know it's bear season, but you better not be hunting bear without my permission." And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am." And he said, "You're what? You're hunting bear?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Would you mind putting that in writing?" And I said, "No, I have no trouble putting that in writing."
Which I read that letter, by the way, today.
Good. So I did. I mailed him a letter, certified it, that I had been hunting bear and I intended to continue hunting these bear. And would you please get my permit done, and then I could go do business with the Forest Service. Well, he misinterpreted that letter to say, and accused me later and gave me an unacceptable performance evaluation, because he said in my letter I said that I'd been hunting bear on National Forest land, and that was never, ever alluded to, stated, or even insinuated.
And I can actually back that up, because like I said, I read that letter today, and it does not mention anything about the Forest Service.
No, National Forest was never mentioned, because I was doing what I was doing on private property, which the Forest Service has absolutely zero management authority on private property.
That's actually what I meant, National Forest, sorry.
Mm-hmm. So without any management authority out here on my activities of trying to alleviate this bear problem, killing and eating my mother's calves, I get an unacceptable performance evaluation, strike one, against me for even stopping to talk to this guy. So they drove to Helena. They didn't mail it or wire it. They drove to Helena, 250 miles. The district ranger did, Jim Rashawn, and he filed a complaint against me personally for outfitting without a permit. And the chairman of the Board of Outfitters wrote me a letter, and he asked me, "What's with this complaint? Do you have something to say about this?" And I responded, and I said, "Yeah, it's totally false. I have never guided anybody this year on National Forest land, so I couldn't have done anything illegal if I've never done the activity." And I questioned, where's the witness? And they said, "Well, evidently you're the witness against yourself, because you made a statement in a letter that you had been hunting bear." And I responded to him, and I said, "I absolutely have been, but it's on private property, and actually I'm going with the guy that's doing the hunting. He's a friend of mine, lives in Montana for years. He has a legal bear tag. He's entitled to one of them bears, which in the end result will spell relief for my mother, and she'll have a better calf crop this fall."
Right.
So this thing was all misinterpreted. Nobody ever asked me to clarify that letter before I was charged. Nobody, to this day, nobody's ever asked me what my intentions was when I wrote that letter, and nobody has ever asked me if I did, in fact, guide on National Forest land. Nobody.
And in fact, you actually had a lawyer for the Montana Outfitters and Guides,
Martin Jacobson.
Yep.
Dismissed the whole charge, and the ranger said, "I don't care if he dismissed it or not. I'm giving you an unacceptable performance evaluation." This ranger was above all law.
Right. And which honestly, and we had this conversation before, the lawyer kind of screwed you a little bit unintentionally, because he didn't bring it up in the case. Because he said, well, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't mention it, so, we don't need to worry about this. So unintentionally, the guy kind of screwed you over, but at the same time, it should have been inadmissible.
Well, and I was pretty tolerant in them days of a lot of stuff that did happen, because you got to remember that 1984 is the first day that the Forest Service had regulatory power over our industry, and we're talking 86, 85, 86, 87. I mean, these people hadn't even got their feet on the ground to know what they were doing, how to go about it, procedures, policies. They were still learning. They were trying to give me I think the outfitter board at that time was trying to give me a fair shake on this. I don't think they recognized a personality clash between that guy and I. I don't think they recognized a personal vendetta in action. I don't think they recognized that, except the chairman of the Board of Outfitters, Ron Curtis, definitely did, because he was a real brilliant outfitter, and him and I worked together with your grandpa on legislation that benefited the outfitting industry. We worked on it together. So we kibitzed in the hall before we'd go in and stuff, so about other things, and I was keeping them apprised of how out of control this forest down here was. There's such a thing as a pilot forest, and a pilot forest is where the Forest Service don't think that they'll get only minimal pushback if they introduced a radical policy that's detrimental to all concerned. And
That's going on right now.
Yes.
You look at Colorado, they're trying to, what was it? A crap ton of wolves. They're trying to
200 pairs.
Yeah, well, I think it's more than that.
Is it?
But they're trying to get it on the ballot rather than going through the Forest Service, or I'm sorry, not the Forest Service, the Fish and Game.
Land management agencies.
Yeah, and actually doing it the right way, the way the whole system's supposed to work, where you've got biologists that can back everything up and stuff like that. So the
reason to go through your land managing agency is because those people go to school to learn land management policies. The average citizen doesn't.
Right.
So if he did vote on this thing uneducated, he could vote something totally detrimental in.
Right.
And we'd be stuck with it.
Yep.
Without any expertise opinion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get a strike one for a bear. For a bear hunt that was on private property, and which at the time you were not representing a client because there was no money exchange.
It's just a friend of mine that had a tag.
Right, a friend of yours that had a tag, and
he was willing to do the family a favor.
Right, and the rule at the time was that you had to have exchange of money to actually go against your client repertoire.
Yes.
And so, like you had mentioned in the last part, that's since changed. But at the time, we're going by the rules that are there. So,
and isn't there a price if you don't do that? The price to pay?
Oh, yeah.
You have to follow the rules that are applicable of the day.
Exactly, and that goes for everyone.
Everyone supposed to.
So that was strike one. What was strike two?
Well, they used that bear hunt. One of them was a bear hunt that I donated, and I've been on front page of North American Hunting Club with an elk.
Actually, I saw a magazine that you were. It says, "Win a Hunt with Billy Hill."
Yes.
And on there.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And it had a bull elk that scored 358 that the man had taken the third day of the hunt with me. He's the man that bought the hunt, and the magazine benefited from all the money because I didn't get a penny out of the hunt. But the way the agreement under North American Outfitter Association, or the National Outfitter Guide Policy, the way it's worded is that you're legal to go with somebody if you're working for nothing. That's plumb legal. But if you start charging, then you've got to pay for your use on the forest.
Right, and that was at the time. Now it's that it's since changed. But,
yeah.
Okay, so how did they use that for?
Well, they got me for 2 unacceptable performance evaluations, even though the attorney for the Board of Outfitters had dismissed the whole charge. The ranger said, "I don't care if you dismiss it or not. This is my forest, and he's getting an unacceptable performance evaluation." The other unacceptable performance evaluation is when they burned out my camp the night before season opened. And I drove up to the ridge looking down.
They
The
burned
Forest
out your
Service.
camp.
The Forest Service.
And did they give notice
No.
for anything like that?
No.
Because, and I mean, I'm speaking maybe out of term, but I would have thought that you would notify anybody, because it's national forest. Anybody has a right to be on that property. It is everybody's property, so you have a right to be on it, no matter where you're from. That is completely unsafe if you have not notified anybody
Yes, it is.
that you're going to be starting a fire on national forest property.
Well,
in a big scale, obviously a campfire is not going to matter, but a national forest agent, if you're going to be doing any sort of burning like that, they have to let you know.
But when they issue me a permit and collect money from me for reserving this site for my benefit in exchange for money, then they have an obligation to notify me if anything's going to change.
Absolutely.
If the value of that camp diminishes, I have a right to reject, or they have to confide in me and get my agreement if it's going to alter the quality of the hunt. And
Right.
they never did.
They have to give you an equal place somewhere else, correct?
Absolutely. Of equal value.
Right.
But they never even contacted me. They just throwed the match and let her burn. And when I went to go down into that canyon, there was a Forest Service rig sitting in the middle of the road, and they said, no, you're not allowed to go down here. And I said, it's my permit down there. And he said, well, I don't care who you are. You're not allowed to go down there. And I said, and I could look down and see my whole tent was gone. All of my personal belongings had burned up. Everything was gone. So naturally, you're not going to be able to use something like that, and your people that are sitting right beside you in the seat of the car can't use it either because everything's charcoal.
So what did you do with your clients?
I brought them back out to my private property. We got 1,100 acre ranch here and a lot of game on it. We hate to guide on the ranch because we like to keep it as a last resort.
Right.
I mean, the ace in the hole.
I would say that was definitely needed.
And if things get really rough elsewhere, we can come back here and at least get them into something, But I had applied and got and paid for that permit of that camp. So the fact that they had denied me the use of that two ways. One, they burned it out so I couldn't use it. The second way is they sat in the road and told me and denied me access to it. So that's two ways they denied me using it. But at the end of the year, you got to either tell the truth or lie. And I guess they wanted me to lie and say that I used that camp and set myself up as a liar, because when I turned it in as no use in that camp, the ranger gave me an unacceptable performance evaluation for that year because I had been seen in the area of my camp with clients. So he knew that I had used it, when in fact I never went near it. I don't even know who packed all my burned up bed frame out of there, cleaned up the mess. I have no idea, because when they run me off, I didn't know how long to stay away because they never told me. And if I had went back with the added hostile environment between them and me, they could have cited me and put me in jail for going back after they had warned me to stay out. So I just stayed away. And so anyway, when I didn't turn it in as used, the ranger gave me an unacceptable performance evaluation again. Now keep in mind, these are adding up. And because he had heard that I had been observed in the area with clients, so that's using my camp. And he wouldn't hear any explanation I had or anything. He wouldn't even hear it. He just gave me the unacceptable performance evaluation. And all of this led me to conclude, that they had determined to get rid of me no matter what. That anything I said was irrelevant.
Wow. That's nuts. So what other, if that's not enough, what other harassment did you go through?
Well, the straw that broke the camel back, the one that they used to drop the hammer on me, and I was done. I mean, I was told I'd never be allowed to get another outfitter permit here because I had been seen with a horse with somebody's sleeping bags, packing their sleeping bags back in the woods. Well, twice that year I had stopped at the ranger station and asked him to get my use permit done because in my planned use I'd applied for the use to pack these people into this rock lake. They had contacted me and said, we'll pay you so amount of dollars to pack all of our belongings in. We're going to be there a week. And I said, okay, by regulation, all I've got to do is stop and tell them that this is my plan, which I did twice through the year. They still never issued me that use permit. But there's a clause in the National Outfitter Guide policy that says if coincidental use comes up on a weekend when there's nobody at a ranger station and you have a chance to make this money over the weekend, that you can go do that use, but you have to report it by the quickest means available when you get back out.
As long as you have put in for the permit.
You don't even have to.
Oh, okay.
If it's coincidental use, you can go in and do the service, then come out and notify them that you did the service, pay them the fees, and they'll enter that into your annual permit that you did that. Now you're all good. You have a record of doing it. You have a record of paying for it. Everybody's happy.
Right.
But even the federal courts denied that they knew anything about that part of the permit system. So here's another funny sidebar to that unacceptable performance evaluation for the Rock Creek episode. I had a congressional inquiry done at the Forest Service by Senator Daines' aides, and the aide said, "Did Bill Hill ever stop by and apply for use to pack in to Rock Lake on July 14th?" And I believe it was like 1991. And everybody that was in there on that teleconference said no. No. Well, Hill said he did. That he seen George Baynard, Bruce Hafley, and told him twice that he needed that use reserved for that day to pack them in and the other day to pack them out. Oh, no, he never ever came near us. And the aide said, then how did your law enforcement man know exactly where to find Billy Hill on that specific day? And there was total silence.
Yeah.
What's that tell you?
So how is it that even after the congressional inquiry that you weren't able to recover?
Because now it has been so long that there are no records, conveniently. There are no records left of anything to do with me at that ranger station. But I have volumes of certified mail receipts and these documents that were exchanged back and forth that verify everything I'm going to tell you today or tomorrow or next year.
Okay.
I'll back it up with a document. Anything I talk about is out of memory of what's in a document I have.
Okay. All right. So what else have we gone through? Or that you went through? You had mentioned something about Plum Creek.
Yes. The Plum Creek manager in Columbia Falls, Montana, was a man by the name of Bill Parsons. And Bill Parson and I met after a telephone call, and he said, everybody that I talked to in Hunting District 121, I'm not from there, but everybody that I talked to said there's only one guy to get on a bighorn sheep permit, and that's Billy Hill, because I think to this date I've got 19 Boone and Crockett sheep with clients. So he called me and he said, I have a 10-year-old grandson that got this bighorn sheep permit, and I know that's rather young to get up in them cliffs and stuff. Is there any way you could help me and him in his pursuit? And I said, oh, absolutely. He said, That surprises me because I was expecting no, because of all the circumstances. And I said, I think that we can get this done. So we met and we went hunting. And while we're stalking one bunch, I'm talking to him about my problems with the Forest Service. I know that he can't help me. I know that. But I'm just gibbering, conversation. So at the end of the day, my son, Chase, I think he was 9, and Bill Parsons' son was 10, and we went out, and I got this sheep spotted, got the boy within range, got him anchored in, kaboom, tag filled. Boone a Crockett ram. Dad is so impressed that one day this thing's over and this kid has the hunt of a lifetime at 10 years old. And he's got it on film because my son was filming the hunt. And at the end of the hunt, I popped the cartridge out of my the old VHS camera and just handed it to him. And I said, this is going to mean way more to you too down the road than it could ever mean to us. So that's yours. And he looked at me a minute and then he said, you know that I'm the manager of every other section up in these districts up here in this mountain range because the company I work for owns them. And I said I had concluded that. And he said, why don't you put together a plan of leasing some sections from us that will suffice your survival in the industry that you have worked at all your life to get good at. And he said today was proof to me that you run a quality show, you're successful, you're pleasant. I don't know what your problem is with the Forest Service, but I don't anticipate any of that with you. And I said, I'll guarantee you right now there won't be any of it. I don't know what their problem is, but I don't anticipate any problem with you. He said, then we got a deal. And I put in for 9 sections to lease, and he signed the proposal. The minute that the Forest Service discovered that he had leased me those camps, they were under the impression they had me so close to being out of business and this new lease pumped new life back into my business. And they were infuriated. They went after Bill Parson. They went all the way to Washington, D.C., tried to get him fired, tried to get everybody out of the way that was resisting them breaking my lease. And later I found out the reason they wanted to break my lease and get rid of me is because the Forest Service wanted to land trade Plum Creek for every one of them sections that I had picked. These sections were to replace their intrusion into Rock Creek to mine Rock Creek. It would push the grizzly bears to the east, and every section I picked was right on the border of the wilderness or within a mile of it. And that's what the Forest Service needed, them sections to replace the sections in Rock Creek that they were disturbing and moving the bears out of.
And that was actually one of the wildlife recovery policies, right?
Yes.
That if they take up land, they have to be able to replace it.
And give the bear back the same amount of acres.
Right.
So the move into Rock Creek was pending, but they couldn't issue any permits to any mining company until this land trade happened. So just the fact that I had the lease there made me an obstacle.
And what is the benefit of the Fish and Game or Forest Service for having a mine in a certain area?
Well, the wildlife agencies are mandated to manage the animals. The animals are definitely disturbed by activity.
Right.
Even air quality, poisoning the streams, the fish are involved. So it involves all of our agencies that manage wildlife and fish, air, water, the whole thing. So they're all part of the decision-making policy or procedure. So they all do play a part,
but I mean, what would be the benefit of having that mine there? You see what I'm saying? Like who would be the puppet master saying, "Okay, well you guys have to get this done because we need to get this mine up and running."
Well, that's your district ranger. He's the main guy in the whole scheme. He's a land managing expert. He's the head of the land management. He's also the coordinator as land management. He's works with the Fish and Game, who owns. The people of Montana own all water, so the Fish and Game manages that for the people. So the ranger has to work directly with the Fish and Game. Then you get the Endangered Species Act, and you got the Grizzly Bear Recovery Group. They play a part. How is your activity going to affect the bear movement, the bear survival? It's a complex coexistence, but it can be done as long as nothing gets poisoned, nothing gets eradicated.
Yeah, but I mean, but I guess what I'm getting at is who benefits from having a mine there?
Well, there's only one answer to that, and that's big money. Your big money interests, mining companies.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is without directly asking it because I didn't want to come out and say it, you know.
Yeah, you didn't have to lead me at all.
Yeah.
I knew where you were going because it's been a thorn in my side that's the case because I hold this country so dear in my heart. And that Rock Creek and the Rock Creek Meadows, Rock Lake, all of that pristine wilderness country back there. I've been I'm 72 years old, and that's been my refuge from too much pressure out here. Coexisting, I can do it if I have my time back in there to kind of get my soul back together,
Yeah.
But if that's gone, where do people like me go to get healthy again,
Right. Right, exactly. I mean, and there's plenty of land out here, but when you've lived your life and nobody wants to see, well, I don't want to say nobody, but if you have any sort of soul, you don't want to see, the poisoning of our streams. You don't want to see the poisoning of our animals, the displacement of our animals, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so I guess basically what I was getting at is, okay, so there's a benevolent agenda behind this. At least it seems there's a benevolent agenda because for what reason would a Forest Service or wildlife manager official want a mine if he completely cares about the animals, the land, and all that? What is the only thing that would make him start to care about a mine? And it comes down to money. What was he getting from it? I know you may not be able to actually prove that, but
it would be speculative.
Right.
But if you do follow the money, sooner or later a picture gets drawn.
Yeah.
And the conclusions are reached, such as the grizzly bear recovery people getting mining company money before the mining companies were allowed to apply for permits.
Yeah.
I mean, that's forced participation.
Yeah. Well, and you have to go back and listen to the other parts of this of these podcast series to hear all that and hear our thoughts behind that, because that way we're not too much up against the wire. But yeah, there's a lot that can be said about that, and it's pretty damn corrupt. So what else happened with the Plum Creek?
Well, they were the Forest Service. The Forest Service was utilizing a very steep, straight up and down, like a beaver slide trail to access this one lake, Elk Lake. So, I mean, there was people getting skinned up, falling, and people were roaring up and tipping their ATVs over backwards and damaging them and getting broken arm here and something else there. So when I leased that lake, the wildlands manager for Plum Creek, Gary Hanby, came out to see me one day, and I met him up there. And I said, Gary, I am fairly good at building trail. why don't we build a secondary trail that is 1,000 times safer than that thing that we got up there? Why don't we do that, build a new trail in here, and I'll do all the work for nothing to the company. It won't cost you a penny, and I'll have a good packed trail. And if anybody that wants to go straight up and down on that old trail will not be in competition with me.
Right.
So he said, that would reduce conflict because we do allow the public to utilize our lakes too. He said, that's a good idea. I'll meet you here next week, and you and I'll flag it in and then go to it. So I built that trail, and from the point it started to the point it ended was 100% on private property. I had just about got the trail built, and I came back down to resupply at the trailhead, and a Forest Service rig had been there, and they had used a post hole digger and dug a post hole and planted a post with a sign that said U.S. Forest Service trail number on my brand new trail that was 100% on private property. I mean, that comes under...
Taking credit for... Well, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, that was just another step of harassment,
Yeah.
There was no legal premise for them to do that. And so I wrote them a letter. And I said, if you need help getting that, removing that sign, I'll be glad to help you. Because it is an illegal sign. You're claiming access that isn't yours legally. You're claiming a trail that I built on private property with my own hands. No federal money involved in it. And the ranger asked me to come in to the office and discuss this with him. But it was a funny thing, when I got back up there next time, the sign was gone, so I didn't have to pursue it.
Yeah. Well, so what sort of issues would have come from having that trail for the public to be using and stuff like that?
Well, it just, 1,000%, close to 1,000 anyway, increased the percentage of visitors to that lake with a real good trail, no safety issues. And the Forest Service, once that trail was in there, started referring everybody that wanted recreation in the Kootenai National Forest to go to Elk Lake. And I felt that the sole purpose for that is to create conflict.
Yeah.
Overcrowded, garbage.
Chase out animals?
Yep. And they did. The Forest Service went onto this private property, took some pictures of some garbage that was up there. I never did see that garbage. It was not there when I left. It was not there when I got back. But they had pictures from some garbage, and it was Elk Lake that the garbage was. And I always thought they packed it in, took pictures of it, packed it back out, just so they had a picture to complain to Plum Creek and get them to break my lease. That way they could land trade for the sections and go ahead and get the mine rolling down here.
Nevertheless, it's private property anyway, so yeah. What the hell do they have a dog in the fight for?
Well, several reasons in my mind. One is the ongoing hostilities between us. They didn't flinch at all.
And not that I'm saying that it's okay to throw out trash and stuff everywhere. You should pick up your damn trash, but
they set this whole scene up.
Yeah.
Because every time the last one was out of camp, he did a garbage check everywhere, because we were totally aware that if somebody stumbles in there and nobody's around but there's garbage, that we're liable. We all knew that. God, I had 30 years in business at that time. I mean, you address known issues, and garbage was always an issue, no matter what camp, no matter what canyon.
Yeah.
Even on my private ranch here, I try to keep up with every little piece of plastic or whatever. I keep it picked up,
So what ended up happening with the Plum Creek?
Well, the minute that the Forest Service canceled my day use, I was out of business. So being out of business, I couldn't utilize the lease.
Oh.
So it just went away. But that's why in 90 days after, The Forest Service had caused me to be out of business. The Forest Service owned all them sections in 90 days after I was gone.
Seems like a coincidence.
Oh, yeah, quite a coincidence.
Yeah. So, wow, that's crazy. I mean, so something else that, and this is a little bit, changing gears, but you had also mentioned some issues that had happened with you and your family. Sending your wife away because you were afraid for your life.
Yeah.
Because your lawyer said, "I think they might try and kill you."
Yeah, he couldn't put it together. Nobody knew about the minerals under the land. We were only seeing the aggression. And anytime anybody is that aggressive and you can't figure out why, you have to assume the worst. Is this guy going to go off the deep end on you, or isn't he? Well, what's his motive for all this? Well, if it's an unknown motive, you got to address it like it is a serious situation.
Well, and this sounds like a damn serious situation.
So, I mean, we were rational, we were collected, but practical. And I said, if they're going to do that, I don't want my family hurt. I don't want my wife hurt. So I took my wife to her mother's house and left her and brought my kids out to my mother's house, and they stayed here. And I kind of went homeless, and that way if they did get after me in that manner, I had nowhere they could pattern me of where I would be going. And that I set that up intentionally to make them stand on one leg as far as knowing who Bill Hill was.
Yeah.
If you're going to come after me, the least you know about me, the better I am.
Right.
So I set that up by farming everybody out and then going homeless. So now, if you come after me, this could be a real running battle.
Right. Right, absolutely.
And the first place I would have taken it is into the woods.
Oh, of course.
Into my expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So you ended up, what ended up happening with your family? Did your family resent you at all because of doing that? I mean,
no.
Did they seem to understand?
They seemed to understand, but I couldn't tell my wife why I was doing it because she would have said, I'm going to die beside you. She would have. Her and I really cared a lot for each other. We were divorced in 92. She married another guy.
And why did you divorce?
Because
not to get too much, too personal. If it was just marital issues or whatever.
No, it wasn't that at all. I wasn't out of the woods yet. In 2009, we had a cow deal that the Forest Service was telling everybody that they were legal to shoot my cattle if the cattle on open range which is legal according to the Montana Constitution. It's an open range state.
And if that is not the case, then they shouldn't have cattle crossing signs on the highway.
I agree.
I mean, that doesn't give you full right to go out and shoot somebody else's cows.
Another evident fact. Why does the railroad and the state highways all have to, by law, fence their right-of-ways?
Yep. It's
to keep the free-range cattle from getting on there and causing death to people.
That's right.
They're obligated to fence it. We're, as private property owner, my ranch, I raise hay, and it's my responsibility to have fence around my hay field because if the neighbor's cows get in there, I can't blame him. I can't impound him. I can't do anything. It's just my loss. So it's in my interest to fence them out. But the Forest Service says, that's good for you people, but we don't adhere to any state laws due to eminent domain. I have that in the document too. Well, that is a pretty deep statement.
Yeah.
Eminent domain only means one of two things. Either in both
that they're taking over.
Both of
basically.
them legs of eminent domain are transfers of ownership. One is condemnation with compensation, where if they take it from you, they have to pay you for it. And the other one is the outright takings clause, where they just take it and you don't get nothing.
Right.
And I kind of think that that's been successfully done by the Forest Service. I think the agency now owns the land that we, the citizens, used to own.
Okay. So going back to...
Even though the Constitution of the United States says the government can only own administrative sites and arsenals.
Right. So, going back to the divorce, what ended up happening?
Uh, well, Footy got tired of living alone up there and asked me if I was going to do anything together with her again, and I wasn't out of the woods because the cow thing was going on. They were telling people to shoot my cows. People were writing me letters, encouraged.
Which actually they weren't your cows.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
Because the Forest Service, they were my mother's cows, and then my mother passed away, and the Forest Service office, the head office of the Cabinet Ranger District, is a half a mile from the home of the brand inspector for the state of Montana in Sanders County. Half a mile. That ranger district never one time ever consulted with that brand inspector about who owned these cattle. But they cited me into federal court 2 different times to appear for punishment for not removing my cattle from a national forest. And the threats I got are something else.
And whose cattle were they after your mom died?
Before my mother died, she put my brother, my adopted brother, Dennis Hill, as the owner of the brand with her. So when she passed away, it became solely his. To this day, he has never received one correspondence about any of his cattle being on national forest. I never owned one of them cattle, never owned the brand.
So there was never due process.
No, I was denied due process. I was just offered some targeting. And they go back, I was talking to one of them, and I said, I kind of half explained this, and I said, why did they feel enabled to come after me? Well, it was your mother, wasn't it, that had them cattle? I said, of course it was. What's that got to do with it? Well, who wouldn't have assumed that they were yours now? There's 9 of us kids. 9. But he said, he just absolutely blatantly told me that a sane man would have just been totally right to assume they were mine.
You just got just over a 10% chance. Well, actually, it's going to be, over a 10% chance that they're going to be yours. What is that, 15%? Because, your sister had died, so now there's 8 of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not very good odds. You take that to Vegas, and you're probably going to get your ass beat.
It definitely deserves you call the brand inspector.
Oh, absolutely.
And ask him to verify.
Well, and even if it was a 50-50, it's due process.
Yes, it is. And I was denied that. The fact that I have the copies of the citations of me into federal court and all the threats that go with it proves that they never, ever did 1 ounce of due process, or they would have immediately stumbled into the true owner of them cattle.
So basically, they killed somebody else's cows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And tried to get you.
To try to get to me, they killed somebody else's cattle. Yes.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And the people at the ranger station was telling they were going up and down the road telling every neighbor, you're totally legal to shoot his cattle if they get on your property. They were telling everybody. I can name you the 2 people at that district that were doing it.
Holy crap.
Mm-hmm.
So because of all this that was going on, you guys just split ways. Is that correct?
Which guys?
Because you and your wife.
Oh yeah, my wife. Yeah. Yeah, because I couldn't bring her back because this thing wasn't going away.
No telling what was going to happen.
92, I take her up there, and then 09. What are we looking at here? 17 years later, it's still going on. This has went on since 1983, and here we are in 2019.
Wow.
Just about my entire life has been devoted to defending myself from the same government that put a uniform on me and sent me into combat.
Wow. That's crazy.
And another thing that I'd like to mention at this time, that I never ask anybody for a favor in my life, but I have been seeing a counselor lately, and they've just determined me at 70% disabled American vet, and within 3 weeks, I believe they're going to give me the full 100% disabled, service-connected because of combat duty.
Wow.
And I came home I came home and found my government to be the biggest lifetime enemy that I had ever envisioned. To
That's
me, not only to me, but to my entire family.
wow. That's crazy.
And I'm not a terrorist. All I ever ask out of my country is please get some oversight out here in the West and get some accountability for your people out here, your administrative people that violate the rules. Please get some accountability.
So what could have been like? What are some things that maybe have been said? And granted, things that are said aren't necessarily recorded. But I think by now, if you guys don't believe this story, I really hope you go out and actually do some real research on this whole thing. And some of this stuff isn't going to be completely easy to find document wise for everybody out there, but do some research on it. But if you don't, if you believe some of this by now, I think you can probably believe that some of the things that were said were probably true. So what were some things that may have been said?
I would like to note two things as far as people following up on this story. Number one is that I am the chairman of a national organization called COWPO, COWPO, Coalition of Western Property Owners. We come to the aid of people that the government wrongfully attacks, tries to bankrupt, illegally forces off their land, whatever. We try to come to their aid and expose what's going on and refer it back to the people to decide. The other thing is that C.J. Hadley, the editor-publisher of Range magazine, and is a member of this group, and I strongly recommend that everybody that cares about the ranchers of the western United States, the land users out here, get a subscription to that Range magazine because it is a wonderful magazine. It tells all the stories that you need to hear about what's happening out here, good and bad. And I think you'll enjoy the magazine, and that little magazine has the back of the citizens in the West against a tyrannical government.
Yeah. So going back to my question, what may have been said by any of the like fish and game officials or something like that that may have made you question if you didn't question it by then that they were just completely out to get you?
One thing that happened within 3 days after the bear attack and the subsequent arrest of all of us is I came out. I'd been threatened to stay away from the media, and this wouldn't go as hard on me if I stay away from the media. So they initiated a trial by media. They were trying to convict us in the media until I just had enough of it, and I said, there ain't a bit of truth in that. But they're sensationalized the whole thing in favor of the fish and game and making us sound like we're the ones that hurt the bear when in fact it was them. So I came out, called the reporter that was doing all that biased reporting, and chipped him down a notch, and told him that it'd sure be nice if he entertained into fair journalism and covered both sides of the story. And the man capitulated, and he done a brilliant job after that. But one of the stories that he did was the captain fish and game in Kalispell, Montana, Lou Kiss, when he called him to interview him about our situation with the grizzly bear. This is the same man that ordered all of us prosecuted. This man's quote was, "If these old boys are innocent, they'll get a chance to prove it in court. Like the state had zero obligation of proving any guilt, that we had 100% obligation responsibility to prove innocence. That's just the opposite of the American system of law."
Yeah. Yeah, that's not the way that's supposed to work.
No, and that was profound, that he, as an educated leader, would ignore the Constitution and the rule of law that blatantly.
Wow. Were there any actual outright threats?
Oh yeah, I got threats against my life for the bear being dead and the whole thing. Yeah.
Wow. What about by any officials or
Yes,
any officers or anything like
there
that?
was a federal agent, big man, uh, big healthy looking man named Rick Branzell that was interviewing Joe Skip, and Joe Skip is a little stature man, but totally a man of courage.
And Joe is actually one of the hunters.
One of the hunters that shot the grizzly bear.
Yep.
So Joe is in this room with this big guy, and Joe is told to sit down, and this big guy would walk around him and the table that he's sitting at in an attempt, and I mean stop kind of sideways and just be staring at him and intimidating him.
Like the bad cop kind of thing.
Yeah, like then he goes to. So I don't think I'm getting the answers that I was looking for from you, Joe. He said, now it would be a real bad time in here if I ain't getting the answers I want, and I got to start hitting on you. And Joe Skip just looked up at him and said, you're going to do what you got to do because you're getting the truth. And with or without hitting, that's the same statement you're going to get from me. He stood his ground against the guy, and the guy relented. But when Joe Skip told me that, I was infuriated. That's unacceptable.
Wow.
I was a reserve officer in this county for 15 years. I wouldn't have had my job one day if I ever treated a citizen like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, police brutality is a big thing right now.
Well, and some people are trying to be good role models, but there's others on the forces that couldn't care less what people think.
Yeah.
They want results. They want guilty people to build them a promotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know exactly what all their motivation is, but it's just not honest.
Yeah.
Honest work.
Some may be power, some may be money.
Yep.
Money and power, whatever. Maybe they were bullied when they were a kid.
But it is a real rude awakening to experience firsthand exposure to that attitude in the law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you have not, if this hasn't made a believer out of you that this whole situation was screwed from the very beginning, we're going to go over a few closing points. So this all started with a 1983 core drill that was done by Billy's mom, and she never got the core drill, but it seems like that because of that core drill, they're able to come up with this whole agenda for attacking Billy's family. Was it 229 million ounces of silver, which I'm not sure what the today's price for silver is, but that's a shit pot full of money. And copper follows silver, so that's not even including how much silver. It's going to be in the billions of dollars for multi-billion dollars in just ore. So because of all this, it seems like the harassment has just kind of compiled. A grizzly bear gets released. They don't even notify him that there's this deranged grizzly bear that they let loose with 14 breaks in its jaw, and it's flopping around and stuff like that. I mean, it didn't even reconnect. The jaw was still broken, and with a broken leg, and it had chewed off its own testicle. I mean, talk about driving a bear crazy, or driving any animal crazy, like to the point where it is mutilating itself is nuts. So they let this bear go and track it with a radio collar all the way to Billy and in his area. Don't even notify him, hey, we got this bear running loose. Oh, it'll fix itself. No, it doesn't work that way. You got a jaw broken like that in 14 places. That bear should have been euthanized. And so it goes 90-something days without eating, and what do you think is going to happen? This bear is on a rampage to try and get something to eat, and Billy just happened to be there, and so they shoot this bear because it attacks Billy, and so you've got rangers threatening. I mean, you've got against his mom all the way back, in the 80s, threatening his mom and trying to change timber sale contracts and you know changing road use and just you name it. Billy gets attacked and his whole life gets completely turned upside down. He ends up losing his wife, and for her benefit, he has to live without his kids for quite a while, and he gets his cows shot, which actually technically I guess weren't his cows, but his family's cows, by the Forest Service and by the Fish and Game, that lead this whole thing. And it really comes down to, it's got to be money. It's got to be money. There's this land. I mean, there's no other reason for that. And I want to go back. I saw the documentation myself that it is the Kootenai National Forest ore deposit report, and it shows the amount that I quoted, 229 million ounces of silver, and it said some odd amount of pounds, millions of pounds of, it was a 2 million?
2 billion.
Oh, 2 billion, sorry. 2 billion pounds of copper.
It's in the Rock Creek environmental impact statement.
Yeah, and so you go through all of that and tell me they don't have a damn motive. They go against his livelihood. He loses his outfitter's license without due process, without even good representation. I mean, it should have been just completely thrown out, and it didn't. And so, I mean, you've got a congressional review, and the congressional review was, a day late and a dollar short, but you've got news articles that had defamed him, and those news articles don't go away. It was a famous case throughout the state of Montana.
It was the longest and most expensive trial in Sanford County's history, including murders.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like I said, with all of that, if you don't believe this, then you don't have to have a tinfoil hat to believe this. I mean, I've seen a lot of this documentation. I've got a copy of a lot of this documentation now, and it is just absolutely nuts. And so I would ask that you guys share this podcast, share any information about other issues that you guys might have had as well. Go to CowPole, start following CowPole and Range Magazine, and start getting involved, because these and I'm not saying that all government officials are corrupt, and I'm not saying that all of these organizations are corrupt and all that kind of stuff, but if we don't do something to keep these guys in check, the citizens of the United States are meant to be the checks and balance for these organizations. And if we don't do that, then they're going to run rampant. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So share this podcast, get it out there. I want as many people as we possibly can to know about this situation. And I feel really bad that it's taken this long, for Billy to really be able to express his side of the story. And this is going to be on a world scale, because I do have anybody can get my podcast all over the world. And it's not the most popular podcast out there, but damn, get it out there. Share it. Tell your friends about it. And, make sure you like and follow, give a review, and, I don't know what else to say.
I got one last comment. I think since 1983 until today, I have never gave up hope. I've never gave up expecting the great country of America to have a checks and balance system of oversight and accountability even within government. Government instills discipline, punishment, and all that on us citizens. But they are mandated to have oversight and be accountable for their own mistakes and their own crimes against the citizens. I have yet to see any oversight of these people, and I haven't seen one of them punished for anything they ever did. And that, to me, is a travesty of justice.
Well, and something else, one other thing that I want to say. If you know anybody who is for helping animals, this is about the one time you're going to hear me say, hey, look, get those people involved. If they're for animal rights and all that kind of stuff, get them involved. This is, like I said, this is about the one time I'm going to say that, because, usually they go overboard, but the fact that they did this to that bear is ridiculous, and it needs to be brought to light. So, Billy, do you have anything else to say?
I would just like to close with the fact that I have respected and been overwhelmed by the beauty of a grizzly bear in his natural environment and his natural health. This was not that case. This bear had been altered by these people and reduced to a starving animal that was bound to do anything to try to survive. That bear, I bear not 1 ounce of resentment towards that poor bear. He was a victim as much as me by the recovery people, so-called recovery people. They were the demise of this bear. We have to put some checks and bounds on this management organizations within the government, because they got a curtain around them that none of us citizens can get in to even comment about, because, we got it under control by a government agency, so you can't play a part. We need to get inside so we have some comment that's heard.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Well, Billy, thank you very much for housing us here and taking the time to be on podcast, and hopefully I can do right by you and get this message out there, and we can continue to work on this whole situation.
Well, it's been my distinct pleasure, Aaron, and I look forward to what you're doing. I think you're a professional at what you do. I'm seeing great things that you're getting accomplished, and I just would like to say anybody that does this kind of business, they need to give Aaron a call, because he's a professional.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.